Let's bring in this discussion now. The South African Weather Service says various parts of the country will continue experiencing severe weather conditions. A level 2 weather warning has been issued for parts of Gauteng, while at the same time flood hit KZN, where at least 7 people have lost their lives and 10 people are still missing due to these weather conditions. KZN also on level 2 weather warnings, at least for now. Let's get you a sense of what the rest of the week looks like, perhaps as we head into the new year. Bring in South African Weather Service Meteorologist Lehlohonolo Thobela, who joins us via our video link this morning. Great to have you on the program as always, sir. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. There have been several warnings been in place since really the beginning of Christmas, which was on Monday this week. Let's start by understanding what's causing this pattern, especially for us this time of the year.
Good morning and thanks for having me. The first thing, I think it's in summer, and in summer we do receive much more of these heavy rains, and especially this time of the year. But as we speak, we have an upper air system that's developing over the southwestern parts, and we also have tropical moisture from the northern areas, which is influencing much parts of the northeastern areas of the country, with the surface low pressure system over the central parts and the surface high pressure system that pushes much more of the moisture also from the eastern parts. So all the moisture that we're seeing is mainly dominating over the central and the northeastern parts of the country, spreading all over to the eastern areas, which then resulted in much more of the rainfall that we've experienced in the past weeks.
Yeah, and whenever we go through a period like this, people want to tell you that it's the worst than it's ever been. What does the data tell us, though? I mean, are we living through a whole lot more rainfall than we've seen maybe in the last decade? Or is this just par for the course? This is what happens this time of the year.
No, I'd say we've experienced much more of extreme weather patterns in the past weeks, and I think it then adheres or goes hand in hand with the atmospheric pattern which we are in, which is the El Nino, where we're experiencing above normal rainfall, above normal temperatures rather, with below normal rainfall, especially over the central and the eastern parts. Yes, there has been some uncertainty in the seasonal forecast where they were suggesting that the eastern parts are yet to still show above normal rainfall, with the central and the western parts being drier than what it should be, but then it showed that we had weather extremes that brought about a lot of rainfall, even though we are still below normal in terms of the forecast, in terms of the seasonal forecast. So yes, we are right on time with receiving a lot of rainfall, and especially this time of the year with all the moisture that comes from the tropical regions in the northern parts, as well as surface systems that are helping with much more of the help to result in more of these heavy rains in the eastern areas.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about that later on in our conversation, but since you've mentioned it, El Nino, from my understanding, means there's higher than usual temperatures and lower than usual rainfall. From what I'm hearing from you, we are still on par with that, despite the fact that we've had half a week now of what feels like persistent non-stop rain, at least in Gauteng.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you remember, a climatological scale is not measured about what we're experiencing on the day or in that week. It's always measured due to a record of time, and in recordings you can see that we've had above normal temperatures the past weeks, as much as we still had rain, and we've also had much more of the heat wave warnings and heat and all these high temperature phenomena that were sent out. Below normal rainfall is really suggested with the El Nino, and it's actually what we've seen. I mean, in the eastern parts, it's not the normal, we would usually get above normal rainfall with La Nina, as we had in the consecutive years, which would mean you would have longer periods of time with rainfall and you'd receive much more than what you would expect in terms of summer. But in this case, we've had below normal. If you look at the conditions, and it's been drier in some areas, especially in the northern parts. However, the weather extremes that we keep incurring in terms of severe thunderstorms, heavy, it's only right now that's when we keep receiving much more of disruptive rain due to tropical air, or rather tropical moisture, with the systems that bring more of the moisture in the northeastern areas. However, if you look at other parts of the country and the eastern parts, it's not every area that receives this type of rain, and it's usually then the case where you look at the records and you see that no, as much as we are receiving weather extremes in terms of heavy rain that results in flooding, we're still under El Nino, because then there are more days where we've also had much more of the dry conditions and heat, especially in the northeastern parts and eastern areas where we had less amount of rainfall. But when rainfall strikes, it really makes a difference in terms of how it's developing.
Yeah, and one of those places where it's been quite a lashing is in KwaZulu-Natal. We've been here before, right? Many people still remember very clearly the April 2021 floods. There were devastating floods last year, and here we are again in 2023. To what extent are these patterns becoming more of a normal trend in KwaZulu-Natal than the exception? Or are we dealing with a situation where perhaps our memories are too short? KZN has always had to kind of navigate these troubled waters. Excuse the pun.
No, I think the thing is that we have climate variability in an area, and each and every area's climate varies in a different way. KwaZulu-Natal would have been, then the impact is increased by the population increasing, and obviously with the positioning of the people that are placed in areas. So you'd have that we had conditions like these in the past where there was no one to observe and no one to actually report on them because there was no one staying in those areas. But in much more of the areas of KwaZulu-Natal, the eastern parts have actually cover most parts of Mpumalanga, Limpopo, Gauteng. Climate varies in different parts. You'd have conditions or days where they're influenced by La Nina and you'd have more rain, and you'd have El Nino where it would result in less rainfall in some areas. But when those things start happening, you'd find weather extremes that really result in what we are seeing in KwaZulu-Natal. And it so helps, or rather shows, by the systems that develop, that when the weather extremes start happening, they really show off, is what we've seen. And I think mainly it's climate variability, and the climate varies, but it's the patterns that usually with these weather extremes would see such areas, especially like Ladysmith, which is under, or rather built in an area around the floodplain, or built in an area that is very low. It depends on every area, but with these kind of weathers, it's what you'd expect when you have such systems, especially around KwaZulu-Natal and touching base in the areas like Ladysmith, as you've mentioned.
All right, Lehlohonolo, Thobela, always great speaking to you, sir. Thanks very much indeed for making time. Lehlohonolo is a forecaster with the South African Weather Service.